do so for you. So, since we're finished with her situation, now, what do you feel like sometimes? I mean,
That's a lot of questions people is in the people's minds. Who do they feel like?
yeah.
And some people feel like Humpty Dumpty.
Ooh, yeah, that's true.
That was written a long time in the 1700s. I think it was published one time in 1810. Humpty
Wow.
Dumpty. Humpty Dumpty,
Sat
what
on
is
the
it?
wall,
Sat on the wall,
Humpty Dumpty,
had a great fall,
all the king horsemen
and all the king's men
couldn't
couldn't put
put Humpty
Humpty Dumpty
Dumpty back
back
together
together.
again.
Yes. And they got another version where at the bottom it said 30 scores, and we wouldn't understood that at that time anyway. And 30 more scores couldn't put Humpty Dumpty back in place. That's what it said. I said, oh my God. And the word Humpty Dumpty is a slang word saying short and clumsy.
Oh wow.
Yes.
And
It's a slang
and it
word
was a
saying
nursery
short and
rhyme for
clumsy. Yeah, it's a
years.
nursery rhyme for many years,
Right.
which also helped the writing and the reading of whoever was listening.
Right.
Because look at it, the way we said it, we didn't have to rehearse it or anything.
No.
Even though we haven't heard about it for a long time.
Right.
Humpty Dumpty, I looked at the character and everything else, and it remind me of some of the people that was in the Bible.
Oh yeah.
And if I would look to one part of the Bible, it would be the New Testament.
Okay.
Saint Luke, the 18th chapter, verses 9 through 14.
Okay.
Or I probably would go a little further because it talks about when there were two men
Okay.
who went into the temple. One was a Pharisee and the other one was a publican.
Okay.
And the two men stood in the temple.
Okay.
And the Pharisee, he stood. Pharisees are people that were in the Bible. They really thought they were better than everybody else. Because and he was praying, saying this. I pray, I pay tithes and I fast twice a week. And things like that, he was saying. And then as he was praying really against this publican.
Right.
The publican that was in the temple was usually the publicans that were familiar with the people in their neighborhood.
Okay.
And then also these particular publicans weren't rich publicans.
Okay.
They were tax collectors. They were people that were contracted by the Roman Empire, Rome, to collect taxes.
Okay.
And they had the military to back them up. Well, this particular publican, like I said, he wasn't rich. And he was in the temple with him. But this is a story about people that make themselves righteous, themselves,
Right.
and despise others. These are the Pharisees. So they despised the publican because he was considered a traitor and one that had left the faith, in other words.
Okay.
There's another term for it, but it's not necessary to say because sometimes you want to throw off whoever's listening.
Right.
And so remember, the Pharisee was praying, and he was, his head all up. He's a nitwit. His head all up in his,
Backside.
yes. And he thought he was all that.
And a bag of potato
And
chips.
see, he exalted himself.
Right.
And most of the Pharisees did exalt it themselves. And everybody else was, considered low. Because they were paying tithes and doing this and that.
But they.
You got some people like that today, of course.
I was gonna say because you have some that are actually.
We ain't off the Humpty Dumpty yet.
I mean,
Keep
look
that
at
in
it.
mind.
Look at it. You have some members of the congregation. They may be well off. Yes, they're paying their tithes. Yes, they're doing
fasting twice a
a week, whatever. Okay, you have this one particular person who is going through it. Going through it, all right? I mean,
Right.
seriously going through it. I mean, they
He's
got
struggling.
evicted, they
Right.
lost their jobs, their kids, whatever. Okay.
Right.
Now, I can't sit up here and say that I fasted twice a day, or I pray, I went to the church and all that, because I am going through it. I can't say that I should not do it, but I am going through it. But another person who sees that, they will gloat on saying, well, I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and that's the reason why I'm in this position of being well off, while you haven't done what I've done, and look what you are, being poor, you did this and that, and it's just like,
Don't stop going to church, because you have
right.
people that's in the church like that. They are the Humpty Dumptys, but they are the ones that are up on the wall. They puffed up, and they recognize the Humpty Dumpty in the story, even though he looked like an egg. And that's the point of a person beginning to be broken. From being exalting themselves, they're about to be broken. And Humpty Dumpty was on the wall.
right.
And like I said, well, the Humpty Dumpty was considered a certain type of beer, brandy.
Oh.
Yeah, it was considered that. Exactly. I didn't know that either, but of course you have to read and keep on picking it up. Most people don't know that. A lot of people don't know that.
Well, there's a lot of nursery rhymes that
Right.
we have
It was
read.
a beer. It was
It's
considered a beer.
Yeah, there's a lot of nursery rhymes that we found
yeah.
out later, several years ago, that represented
Excuse me.
killing and
and the link to a whole lot of things.
Yeah, a lot of things. But anyway, back to
So the Humpty Dumpty thing, it means a little bit more than that politically, if you look in some view, in England, because that's where it came from.
Okay.
The writer and everything else.
Okay.
So Humpty Dumpty was considered a brandy or beer.
Oh.
Yes.
Okay.
They call it brandy, or they call it ale, which is a beer. It was a bitterness. They sweeten it up, and they had to bitter it so it can balance off. So it was pretty tasty. Even though I don't drink beer, I bet it was pretty tasty still. Anyway, Humpty Dumpty was he was an arrogant nitwit.
Oh yeah.
I was going to say something else.
Yeah.
Because he was considered an arrogant nitwit. He wasn't broke. He was an educated person. His head was all up his buttocks.
Right.
He was on the wall, and he was confident that the king, men, would be able to put him back together again if he fell. So how do you compare that with the Pharisees in here, and compare that with some that in history said that he actually was talking to someone? Her name was Alice.
Oh.
Yeah, I read that. Alice was not an educated lady. She didn't answer questions that well and things like that. And he undermined her all the time.
So he was.
And she wanted to say some bad things about him because she thought he was a nitwit. It's another word, but I can't use it. But anybody know that one? You know it. But anyway, yeah. So this is what we have in the world. So you see, the Pharisees is like that. You get people that's in church sometimes get like that. They've been there for a while. They didn't pay their tithes and everything, and it psychologically messed their minds up. Here you find this man. He was a publican, and this publican, like I said, particularly if you look in the Greek, it might pronounce it T-L-O-N-E-S, and you'll see that you got to do your homework. That's all you have to say about these things. That when he talked to the Lord, he kept his eyes, and he said, he did like that to his chest, his breast. That's what they call it. And he said, "Have mercy on me, Lord, for I am a sinner." And Jesus said,